Divorcees of Reddit. When did you know your marriage was over? When I read her texts to another dude about how much fun she had screwing him. And how quickly they could marry once she was free. Got divorced 4 months later. Spoiler alert. Those two lovebirds broke up when he wouldn't leave his wife. Karma. It was after the third time of losing her temper and trashing the house. Including throwing a guitar stand at my work laptop and breaking it. She went to her mom's for 2 weeks and I realized I was much happier without her around. After a week I told her I wanted a divorce. Moral of the story? Don't be with someone who thinks violence is an appropriate answer to problems. We were living with her parents so we could afford for her to be a stay-at-home mom. I was very unhappy living with her parents and told her I wanted to move out. She said the only way that was happening was if I doubled my income because she wasn't going to work. So I moved out without her. When I realized how much abuse I took on a continuous basis. It wasn't physical much. But I would get things thrown at me. Cops came once because the neighbors once thought I was abusing her. She admitted to the cops that it was her throwing things and put a hole in the wall with the shoe she tossed. Don't worry. The cops asked me what I did to piss her off. Told us to keep it down and left. A majority of the abuse was verbal. I could never earn enough money. When I worked over, I was never home and she felt lonely. When I was home I couldn't get everything done she wanted me to do to her level of satisfaction. What made me finally wake up? One of my co-workers said something causally, man. She treats you like speep. That is what made me wake up and seek a lawyer. That divorce was the most costly and brutal thing I've ever gone through. Still paying on it. And will be for years to come. When our power was shut off but he had just purchased a new fun car for himself 3 weeks after totaling his other fun car. I had no idea we were so behind on the bills because he insisted on always being in charge of finances since I just stayed home and didn't work. I opened up my own bank account the next day and put $20 he had given me for groceries in it. Started cleaning houses during the day while my mom watched my kids. Left 6 months later. When I realized that for months I had been trying to guess what mood she'd be in when I got home from work so I could enter the house appropriately and not make her any angrier than she'd already be. The day I got a call from his mistress. While he was in the room with her. Telling me she wasn't his first mistress. Come to find out there have been at least 3 long-term mistresses. When I should have known. My spouse sent me an email that said he didn't love me anymore. When I actually knew. He announced his engagement to an 18-year-old a few days after the divorce papers we signed. I was a little slow there. My wife said I'm her second husband, that she knew her first marriage was over when her husband admitted he allowed their 2 children to spend several dozen overnights with his stepfather. A man who had molested her husband and his brother when they were children. He'd never told her what happened to him. And when she finally figured it out she flipped her speep. Took another 3-4 years for that marriage to stagger across the finish line. When she began screaming at our 3-year-old son to shut up. I was willing to take her abuse. I couldn't stomach her doing it to our son. After a party at his parents'. He hit me on the car ride home because I didn't have a good enough time. I yanked the emergency brake and got out of the car. I never went back. The first time he physically abused me. I had put up with a lot before that. Verbal abuse. Emotional abuse. Etc. But I told him before we were ever married. If he ever laid a hand on me, I'd be gone that same day. He acted surprised. He acted confused. He cried. he begged. But I stuck to my word. I've watched too many friends/family members stay in abusive relationships because after the first time, they were trapped in the cycle of abuse followed by penitence. By the he loves me, but he hurts me. I knew these men and women were strong and fierce. And if they were stuck in abuse, even with all their strength, how could I possibly avoid the trap if it happened to me? I knew I wouldn't be strong enough to leave if I stayed past the first time. Because with abuse, it's always a first time. Meaning there will be a second and third and fourth. So I left. And I'm not sorry. Because it justified every time I thought I was overreacting or being dramatic. Every time I felt like I was the problem. When really it was him all along. Not a divorcee. But my parents got divorced. Twice. In order. Started hitting the kids. Started making mountains out of molehills. And the recent one was started having affairs. When I found out her plans to leave, so she abruptly left. It didn't go well for her at all, but that was a long time ago. Far as I know, she's still alive. I'd have heard if she died probably. She has no part in our kid's life whatsoever. That's actually for the best. When I caught him trying to throw a metal folding chair at our oldest child. When I found myself wishing he was dead just so I wouldn't have to be married. Now that we're divorced, I can't believe I had those thoughts. He's a great man. A great dad. And my best friend. It wasn't his fault that marriage was suffocating me. If something happened to him now, I'd be devastated. But then, every time he came home I was disappointed that he'd survived another day. Not a divorcee either. But I managed to convince my mother to file for divorce after a full year of my father refusing to speak or even look at her. They were living in the same house. Paying the same bills. Using the same utilities. He got angry at her over something I don't even remember now. And just decided to pretend she didn't exist. That's commitment. I've never wanted kids and he knew and accepted it. When he told me, I figured you'd change your mind by now. I was out. Too goddamn late. It would have saved me a ton of mental anguish and years of healing had I just left after the first time he was verbally abusive to me over something that literally nobody else would have an issue with. But I was stupid and stayed until he found a new woman behind my back to do that too. They're divorced now. Too. And she's going through it harder than I did. Sucks because even 5 years later I don't really know how to fully trust a man. Nor do I need a man in my life. I kind of worry that when the right guy comes along I'm going to mess it up because I like the uncomplicated nature of living alone with my kid. So not totally alone. So I only get attracted to physically and/or emotionally unavailable men because they cannot hurt me and I don't have to share a space with them. When she got arrested for domestic violence. I came home from work one day and she was gone. Along with all her belongings and some of mine. 15 months later. Still not heard a word from her other than when my lawyer sends her forms and I get them back with signatures on them. That's so weird. When I was away on a business trip and I discovered she'd left our 2 infant children 1 and 3 at home alone for 7 hours to go out clubbing with her girlfriends. This was just one in a long string of irresponsible things she'd done since becoming a mother. But it was definitely the moment when I knew it was over. I walked in on my husband in bed with another woman in my house. And I say my house because I made the entire down payment and paid the mortgage. I moved in with my parents for a bit while he stayed living in the house. I would have panic attacks every time I went in the house after. I continued to pay all the bills for him to live there. We were going to try and work things out. We had been together for so long that we didn't want to throw it all away over one mistake. But while I was paying all of the bills for him to keep living in the house while I was living at my parents', he booked a trip to Las Vegas. Las Vegas was my dream trip and he never made an effort to go with me. He told me he would cancel the trip to work on things and I believed he would. Which was stupid on my part because he always lied to me. About a week before he was supposed to go, he stopped talking to me. He told me he was going the day he flew out, and the same evening I went and signed a lease for an apartment. When he got home he begged me to work things out. Said the trip wasn't worth it and said everything he could to try and get me back. The house sold in February and we were divorced a year later.